Hello everyone, welcome. I hope you're having a great day. My name's Andrew. I'm a current third-year medical student at a USMD medical school. In this video, I just want to talk about medical school in terms of finances. I want to talk about all the ins and outs of finances of medical school, and then I'm going to take you through a specific example of my medical school's expenses. So let's go ahead and get started. So let's get right into it. Medical school is a huge cost, both in terms of financials and as far as time commitment. So as far as specific costs, a study online found that the average cost of attendance annually for public U.S. medical schools is $38,000 per year just for tuition, and the cost for out-of-state is $62,000 a year for tuition. Out-of-state is always going to be significantly more expensive no matter which medical school that you go to. The cost of living, of course, will depend upon where you're living. Say you're living in upstate New York, it's going to be a more expensive cost of living than if you're living somewhere in the Midwest. So that just has to be something that's factored into your decision when it comes to medical school picks and where you want to go specifically. As far as loan options, there are multiple options available to you. The one that most people will take is federal loans. So as far as federal loans, you have two separate kinds of federal loans for medical school. You have an unsubsidized loan that covers usually the cost of attendance if you stay in state. Unsubsidized means that the interest on the loan is not subsidized, so you have to pay the interest yourself. And that interest begins accruing from the moment you take the loan out. There are actually fees to even take out the loan in the first place. It's a small percentage of the actual loan amount that you get. The other type of loan is called a Grad Plus loan. The Grad Plus loan is used mainly, in most cases, for covering the cost of living. So in my case, I used the Grad Plus loan to cover my cost of living. In terms of interest, the unsubsidized federal loan is generally going to be a lower interest rate than the Grad Plus loan, which means that you want to take out more unsubsidized than Grad Plus. Some other loans that are available are any of the private loans that you would get through a bank. Oftentimes, I would suggest against getting these type of loans unless absolutely necessary, because they often have, for one, variable interest rates, which means that the interest rate that you sign up for on day one may be raised at any point without warning, and then you'll be responsible for paying the extra interest. Also, they can make it to where you have to start paying the loan back during medical school, which is an additional financial burden that you just don't need. So if it were up to me and you could afford to do so, I would try to make it solely on the federal student loans if possible. So for those of you that are curious, the way that my student loans break down is that I use the unsubsidized student loan from the government to cover the cost of tuition at my medical school, and then I, as mentioned, use the Grad Plus loan to cover my cost of living. So that would be, my cost of living is somewhere around $20,000 a year. Luckily, I was able to get partial scholarship at my institution for being from a disadvantaged background. As you may know, I'm from Eastern Kentucky, and my family is not particularly wealthy, so I was actually able to get a $5,000 a year scholarship at my school based on the fact that I'm from a disadvantaged background, which helps tremendously. Cannot thank the scholarship fund enough for allowing me to have $5,000 a year off my cost of attendance to the medical school. I also applied for a local scholarship back in Eastern Kentucky, and that differs depending on the semester, but around $1,400 to $1,500 per semester every time that I reapply for that scholarship. So that also is a tremendous help to me. That means basically that I have to take out $8,000 less per year on my loans total because scholarship covers part of my tuition. I understand that most students get no form of scholarship whatsoever to medical school, but don't let that deter you from going to medical school because you can still use loans to make it happen. As far as the in-state versus out-of-state debate, I would definitely recommend staying in-state just from a financial aspect. It's going to be, on average, like as I mentioned before with the rates nationally, it's going to be about $20,000 a year cheaper. So you're talking $80,000 over the course of 4 years in medical school. That is quite a burden to bear just to go out of state. So I would not recommend that for anyone. So I'll get into this in just a minute, but for example, the cost of tuition at my institution is right around $40,000 a year in state, which I am. Out of state would be about 60 grand a year, so it's right around the national average. So to get into more specifics, I'm going to talk about my school's particular tuition cost of living data sheet from the financial aid office, and I'm going to show that on the screen, and then I'm going to talk through it. So let's go ahead and get that up on the screen now, and then I'll talk through the sheet. That way you have a specific example of your kind of average cost of attendance for a medical school. I believe that my school represents right around the average cost of attendance for a public school. Of course, a private medical school is going to be more expensive, but this example is for my school, which is a public U.S. medical school. Let's get started. So just so you know, this is for the 2019 to 2020 tuition rates for my school. So my school offers tuition lock-in, which is the tuition that you pay the very first year, you pay throughout all 4 years in medical school. So as you can see, looking across the top column, you have Med Year 1, Med 2, Med 3, Med 4, and then the length of each year. So for instance, the first year of medical school is 10 months and you get a 2-month break in between first year and second year. The second year is 11 months, third year is 12 months. It's a full year. Believe me, third year can drag out a little bit, but it's definitely fun. And then I still have fourth year to go. That's 10 months. So again, the tuition, for example, at my school, these are the actual numbers. The tuition for the incoming class will be $40,760 per year throughout the 4 years. It's nice that my school offers the tuition lock-in because there's no surprise expenses from year to year whenever the tuition goes up. It maintains that throughout. So notice that that was tuition R, so that's tuition for residents. Tuition for non-residents, tuition NR, the second column, is $61,982. Call it $62,000. Basically, that is $21,000 more expensive than being in-state for my school, which is a huge difference, as mentioned previously in the video. So after tuition comes all the other associated fees. This will come with any medical school. The prices of these fees is usually not baked into the tuition. So for example, books and supplies, a health fee, which is to cover vaccinations and that sort of thing. Technology fee, so at my school, the laptops and all other technology services are provided by the school. So we're charged that throughout over the course of the 4 years to break up the cost. Disability insurance, exactly what it sounds like. I'm not exactly sure what a recreation fee is. I believe that may be to pay for we have a relaxation room in the medical school with pool tables, table tennis, and reading nook and chess and all sorts. It's a game room basically. I believe that might go to pay for that. I'm not terribly sure what that goes towards. NB exam stands for National Board Exam. So you can see in the second year of medical school, the NB exam is $630. So National Board Exams, that would be your step 1 exam. If you're unfamiliar with that, that's just the first national board exam that you have to take in order to earn your MD degree. In med school year 3, you can see there's a $2,270 charge. That is for step 2. So you take step 1 first, in between first and second year, and then you take step 2 at the end of your third year, between third and fourth year. So that's quite an expensive exam, as you can see, $2,270. Quite pricey. Moving on, residency applications. So applying to residency, just like every other aspect of medical school, is unfortunately very expensive. This would be an average cost. It depends on how many programs that you apply to, the actual cost that you're going to pay. Also, this accounts for travel expenses, and travel expenses for away rotations, travel expenses for away interviews, all that sort of thing. They've tried to do their best to average in the cost of getting into a residency program. Drug testing fee, there's a drug test before you start third year at my school. So moving on to the total resident curriculum cost, you can see across the 4 years, it's right around $43,000, $44,000 in-state, $65,000 to $66,000 for out-of-state. That's not including living expenses. So the next column down addresses living expenses. Living expenses vary at my school between $22,000 to $26,000 a year. $26,000 a year being the most expensive year in med school year 3, because you notice it's a 12-month schedule. So you need 12 months worth of expenses baked in, so the total living expenses is exaggerated in that year for that reason. So that brings us down to the totals. So as you can see down at the bottom column, the total for a resident in-state would be $66,000 to $71,000 a year. When you compare that to the non-resident, that's $87,000 to $92,000 a year. So again, upwards of $20,000 plus more expensive per year for a non-resident. So I just wanted to show you this to give you a real-life example of what my school specifically charges. This is actually the sheet that they give you on orientation to let you know about all the expenses. So I hope you found this useful. So now we're going to exit out of this sheet and move on to the next part of the video. Hey, I'm back. If you made it through the portion of the video that I just went through the sheet, then I applaud you, as that's kind of boring stuff, but some people may find that important, so I wanted to put that in the video. So just to wrap up, I want to say first off that medical school is expensive, but it is totally manageable with loans. I would definitely not let the cost of medical school prevent you from going to medical school. I also just want to recap the types of loans that we talked about. So we talked about unsubsidized government loan, which is the loan that you use to cover your tuition. We talked about the Grad Plus loan, which you can use to cover your cost of living. We talked about private loans through banks, which I don't really recommend due to the variable interest rates and the fact that they can make you start paying them back during medical school, which is inconvenient to say the least. We also talked about my personal situation where I'm using the unsubsidized loans to cover my tuition and then using the Grad Plus loan to cover my cost of living. We also talked about my school's specific spreadsheet. That spreadsheet had many things listed in it as far as all the costs that they think are the most important for medical school and that you should really be aware of. So I guess that's about all that I had. Again, I hope you had a really good day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.